We're going to current Daf, Mesechta Rosh Hashanah Daf, beginning on the top line of the Yomim. We continue to explain the halacha of our previous mission, which discusses how they would inspect the witnesses that would come to testify that they saw the new moon, regarding all the different questions that they would ask them. Today's Daf. Some of the things we discuss in today's Daf are regarding the actual process, like we're talking about questioning and examining the witnesses that are testifying regarding seeing the new moon, the process of sanctifying the month in the Beis HaMikdash, regarding exactly how did they go ahead and actually do this sanctification, whether one is permitted to make models of the heavenly constellation. That's a lot of and Beis. So we keep those concepts we were having on all these Daf models, like we're saying Eidos HaChodesh. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, the way they would make the Rosh Chodesh would be that witnesses would testify that they saw the new moon, and they would come and they would inspect them, and then they would say Mekudesh. Chodesh Chasar, Chodesh Mali is always this idea regarding that a month could either have 29 days or 30 days, and then Rosh Chodesh is going to be either on day 30 or day 31. There's a halacha of Isuk Tzuros, which is a prohibition of making certain images because of that, just because it says that you don't make them. So we begin the card Daf Chavdal Menaf. I was going to say as I looked this up, but it's that's there's making, and we'll see there's actually worshiping. So we begin on the top line where the Mishnah had said some of the questions that they asked him. We spoke about some of the questions on the previous Daf. Some of the questions were how high was it, which direction was it leaning to, and hulu, which actually some manuscripts don't have this part of the Mishnah, and it would seem to be appropriate not to have it, because actually the Gemara's discussion here is actually not going to be on the words we just quoted from the Mishnah. It's actually going to be from what we quoted earlier in the Mishnah, which was Litzvayno Iladrina. So Tanachad we learned in one brisa, which the way the Gemara actually is understanding this Litzvayno Iladrina, because originally we have in the previous daf a question that we said Lefnei Hachama is Litzvayno is Ladrina. So we said no, Lefnei Hachama is not the way you think it is. Lefnei Hachama doesn't mean in front or behind it. That would be the same thing. It actually was Pigimasa. So actually the Gemara is actually differentiating now. Actually, when it says Litzvayna, it's not necessarily of the sun, but actually it's Litzvayna of the world, as we'll see in the Gemara's discussion. The problem is the Gemara quotes a contradiction. On one brayso it says Litzvayna, when they're asking, wait a second, this new moon that you saw, where did you see it? Was in the northern part of the world. So the brayso says then Dvar Kayama. Then his words are upstanding and it's valid. If he says Litzvayna, says he saw the new moon in the southern, Lo Makom, he hasn't said anything. That's what the brayso says. So the Gemara says, learn the brayso pink faket. The brayso says if he said he saw Litzvayna in the southern part of the world, Dvar Kayama, and his words are valid. Litzvayna Lo Makom, he says to the north, he hasn't said anything. So which one is it? It's exactly the opposite. He says, well, like Kasha, it's not a difficulty. Khan, over here in the first brayso that says it's only valid if he says it's to the northern part of the world, is b'Meisach Chama. It's in the summer months. What about the summer months? So when you have the long days of Tkufas Tammuz, which is the summer season, the sun sets all the way at the end of the west. We know it rises in the east, it sets in the west. But it sets not just on the west, all the way towards the north. As a brayso teacher in Avon of Nanbam Aleph, that the sun goes out on the long days and it sets on the long days. That is called the northern front. As we're going to shortly explain, as this picture is illustrating, the summer months is starting all the way up north and the cycle ends all the way to the north too. So when did we say that if he says he saw the new moon in the north, then it's going to be valid? That's in the summer months. But Khan in the second brayso it says no, it's not valid. He says it's all in the northern part. It's only in the southern part. Is b'Meisach Shanim, is in the winter months. What's in the winter months? In the winter months, the sun goes out. It's a very short day, and that's what's called Pnei Dar. It's in the southern part of the world. Now that's extremes: summer and winter. Summer you have the longest days, and winter you have the shortest days. Now, what's with when you have the solstice, which you have the spring, when you have the equinox, when you have the spring and the autumn, solstice when it's the longest days and the shortest days, and you have the equinox, let's say Nisan and Tishrei, when you have the autumn and you have spring. So then the sun goes out in the middle, like over here, in the middle of Mizrach, and it sets in the middle of Ma'ariv. because by Tkufis Nisan, it's like a perfect 6-hour day and 6-hour night. That's what the equinox is. It's exactly 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So the sun is leaving from the middle of Mizrach, and it goes to half of Mizrach, and all of Dharm, meaning its travels go throughout the south, and it ends by Chatzi Ma'ariv, by the midpoint, halfway of Ma'ariv, and it sets over there. Now, at nighttime, actually, what happens is, which you don't see, the other side of this picture, it goes around the globe, half of Ma'ariv, meaning this half of Ma'ariv, and all of the north, meaning it's going all towards the north, and again, Chatzi Mizrach, and then the sun is rising again. Now, then the next day, the day starts to go ahead and rise a little bit by the midpoint of the east, a little bit towards the north. And it sets a little bit further due north on the west. And every single day, if you saw a picture, we would be showing you going round and around and around and around as the sun is going around, really the earth, but the way it looks like the sun. And every day it's going between when it rises and when it sets, it's going a little bit further north until you get to Tkufis Tammuz, which then it rises all the way basically on the northeastern corner, and it goes 3 directions, and it sets by the northwest. And from that point on, which is the summer solstice, it's the longest day of the year, then it starts getting less and less. The sun keeps on going, rising a little bit lower down south, and when it reaches Tkufis Tishrei, which is the autumn equinox, then it's coming out in the midpoint of the east, again, to the midpoint of the west. And the night and the days are the same, exactly 12 hours, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Then again, it starts going a little bit further down south until you get to Tkufis Tevis, which is the winter season. And that day, it's like coming out from southeast. That's where it's rising from the southeast. And it sets in the southwest. And then from that point on, it starts going back towards the north. When it rises and it goes a little bit more towards the north and it sets. And constantly until you get to Tkufis Nisan, which then it's coming out again. That's the spring equinox, which is coming up from the midpoint of the east. And it's resting, it's setting in the midpoint of west. So it comes out, and this is the main point that Rashi is going through this whole cheshbon, which I believe one of our videos shows this, how it actually goes with the sun around the earth and the different seasons. But his main point is like this. So it comes out that in the summer months, most of the sun goes most of the western side before it sets. Because we're saying that if it's in the summer, it's basically on this side, on the northern part. So when it's setting, it's going most of, like, let's say setting over here. As a picture not drawn to perfection, but basically before it's setting, it's traveling down the most of the western side, right? The whole west, it's covering that whole west before it sets, and sometimes even the whole western side before it sets. Now, whereas the winter months, so it's only going a little bit on the west, meaning it's going to the south, and it's only covering a little bit of the west. And sometimes it doesn't even go into the west, even just a little bit. Let's say starting over here, it's going around like this, and it's setting like literally by Karen, that's by the coldest day of the year, the shortest day, it starts over here. It's like we said, the Karen Mizrach's and it sets on Karen Mizrach's Tzavaynis. So it's barely going into the west. Now, the moon, says Rashi, whenever it's renewing itself by the Moiled, it's always in the Karen Maravas Durenis. It's always in the southwest. That's where the moon is, over here. So therefore, he says, in the winter months, which the sun is not coming into the west, it's only coming into the west when it's setting. So then the moon is going to be in the west first. Comes out that the moon is Litzvaina, is to the north, because the sun is only getting there all the way at nighttime. Now, whereas in the summer months, where the sun is all the way over here, again, I don't know if I'm drawing it to perfection, but basically it's much in the west. So it's before the moon in most of the months towards the north. So it comes out that the Levana is going to be B'draima. That's the difference. The difference is that the sun, if it's in the winter, is over here, and the moon is over here, because again, the sun is always trying to catch up with the moon when it's coming to the Moiled. But if it's in the summer, it's over here, and if it's in the winter, the sun is over here. And that's going to make a difference if we're going to say that if the moon is Litzvaina or L'draima. Taisa has a question that in the previous stuff, we just said that Rabbi Yochanan says that the Chama never saw Pegibasa Shalavana, but if the Lavana is in front of the sun, so then the Begima Lavana is always facing towards the east, so then the Chama is going to see its Pegima. So he brings from Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he says that he showed him that there's two different galgalim, like two different, what's the word for that again? That's the orbit, yeah, is different between the sun and the moon. And he said that it could be that you could see the moon before the sun, so like to the north, but the sun is not seeing its Pegima, because the galgal, the orbit of the moon, is lower down than the orbit of the sun, which is above it. It says, so based on that angle, he says that although we're going to see the moon first, so to speak, but the sun's still not seeing the Pegima, even though the Pegima Levana is facing that way, towards the east, and the sun is behind it, says it's still not going to see the Pegima Levana. In the Pashta Eifin, what the Gemara was saying is that there's a difference between the summer months and the winter months. In the summer, the sun is all the way towards the north, so then we're going to see that. We're going to see the moon L'draima, and if in the winter months, the sun is all the way behind, and we're going to see the moon as it's Litzvain. So the Gemara continues with the teaching of the Mishnah, which these are actually on the words we have in the Mishnah. Someone says that the height of the moon, it seemed to him, like if he's looking from the horizon, like two goads. A goad was a tool that we used in prodding the animals. So it's just a tool that they had, which was a basic staple. So they mentioned in those terminologies. One says it was 3 goads high. So their testimony is valid because it's very close. Hey, one says 3 goads, one says 5 goads. Then the testimony is invalid because it's too much of a discrepancy. Now, but they could combine for another testimony, which Tracy points out that Rashi specifically said that one of the two, if let's say they contradict each other because one's saying 3, one's saying 5, if let's say the guy who said 5 meets up with another guy who he could say 5 also, then they're going to combine, because according to the one that says Mahani Sadish Hakri Lamali, that obviously someone's lying over here, we wouldn't want them to say testimony again. But if this guy joined up with another guy, it's 2 against 1, and therefore then we believe those 2 who said 5, we don't believe that one guy who said it's 3. So that's regarding, like we said in the Mishnah, Kamay Gevaya. Now regarding other types of cases, says the Gemara, term of Lenda Brisa, Inuhu B'mayim. Let's say they say we saw it in the water. What does that mean? We saw it in the water. Through the reflection of a river or a stream or a spring, we saw the image of the moon in that reflection. Or let's say the new Ba'ashash, we saw it in a lantern. Or the new Ba'av, we saw it was a cloudy day, and we saw it illuminating through the thickness of the cloud. So Imein Allah, we can't testify because you didn't see clearly the Levana. Let's say you saw Chetz B'mayim, half of it was in water, Chetz B'av, half was in cloud, and Chetz B'ashash, half of it was in a lantern. Imein Allah, we can't testify. So the Gemara says a question on the Brisa, I don't understand. If you said that you saw all of it in one image, let's say the water or the lantern, you said that's not going to work. You have to say if you saw half in the cloud and half in the water, what you would think that's going to be better. If anything, that's worse. You're going to see one whole image. So this is what the Brisa was saying. Half was meaning it's not one case. Each one of these cases, if only half was in the water, but half you saw in the sky, or half was in the cloud, but half you saw in the sky.
It's the same half.
No, meaning it's not one big case of, I don't think Chetzi meant half, but like let's say so part in the cloud and part in the water and part in the lantern. That's definitely not better because you didn't even see one whole image. He was saying that you saw half in the sky, half you saw the half of the moon, the other half you saw in the cloud. So that's better because it wasn't all through the cloud. Or half in the lantern, half you saw in the sky. even though you saw part of the actual moon, I mean, you cannot testify. You have to see the whole moon in the clear sky. Another case, talking about the Brisa. Let's say the witnesses say they knew, we saw it. Then we didn't see it anymore. So Amin Allah says the Brisa can't testify. So you want to ask, I understand. What do you mean? Once you have to continue seeing it. Once they saw it, why can't they testify? They don't have to follow it forever. So Amabai says no. This is what they were saying. We saw it by default, without by ourselves, in the sense of we didn't deliberately look for it. Then then we went to look for it consciously to testify. But I knew we didn't see it. Then then we cannot testify. My time, what's the reason? Says because it could be they just saw a circle of a white cloud that looked like the moon. I mean, they said, wait a second, wasn't that the moon? And then they went to look for it again. Then they didn't see it, so they saw it, but not consciously. And then they're like, wait a second, it's stuck in the mind. We have to go tell. And they couldn't find it anymore. Then that's when they're not going to testify, because it could be very likely they saw something that had the form of the moon, but wasn't actually the moon. The next Mishnah continue on this that we're discussing here regarding the Kiddush HaChaydish through the witnesses. So the next step after, like we said in the previous Mishnah, we inspect, we're baiting the Eidim, and it turns out what they're saying is right. So Rosh Bezdin Mekudesh. So the head of the court says it's sanctified. And the ganze Kehillah, the whole people, they answer Mekiddush, it's sanctified. Now we have a machlek is exactly when did they do this? The Tanakhama says Ben Shinir Bismana, Ben Shleini Bismana. Whether they saw it in its time, meaning day 30, which we call the previous month was a chaser, they're going to do this, and even Ben Shleini Bismana, whether they didn't see it in its time, meaning they saw it only day 31, which was the previous month was a Malay. Either one, Mekadsh said they're going to do this process of Mekadosh, of sanctifying. But he disagrees. Says no. That Imleider Bismana says if it's not seen in its time, meaning you're only doing it on day 31, in Mekadsh say you're not going to sanctify it anymore. Why? You don't have to Mekadosh it. In heaven they're already sanctified, because we know it can't be day 32, can't be month 31 days. So from Shemayim they already made it a new month. You don't have to go ahead and be actively Mekadosh it. Now the Gemara explains this opening halacha of Rosh Bezdin Mechulu. We said that the head of the court, he says Mekudesh. He says, no, we don't know this idea from that he has to say Mekudesh. So he says it's all Makrot, a pasuk Meikra. Says the famous pasuk V'daber Moshe Meyadi Hashem. Moshe spoke the Yom Tov of Hashem. What does it mean? Moshe said it. Mikad Rosh Bezdin Mekudesh. We see that the head of the court, Moshe Rabbeinu, has to say that it's sanctified. He has to actually do a dibur. Now the Mishnah then said, all the people, they respond Mekudesh. Says, where do we know this from? So my papa, because Amakar says the pasuk in Yikra, also famous, Asher Tikru Oisam, that they should recite them b'mayadam. What's Oisam? Kari be'atem. They without a vav, Oisam could be read atem in the plural. That many have to do it. So we see that the they have to say Mekudesh. Another source of Nachman Yitzchak Gama, it says within that pasuk, Elohim Moyaday. These are my Moyadim, which he reads it as Heim Yirbu Madai. Elohim, Heim should say Moyaday. Now it says Mekudesh trays in the Lama. Why did I have to say 2 times? Because the Chassidus says within Mikro'ei Kodesh, Mikro'ei is plural. Sounds like 2 times that when they make Mekadosh, this Kodesh has to be Mikro'ei, 2 recitals. Mekudesh. Now, we said in the Mishnah, he had said, Im Lo Nir Bismanai. He says, if you didn't see it on day 30, then we're not Mekadosh it. In other words, day 31, we're not going to say Mekudesh, only day 30. So actually, those are 2 opinions you have in the Mishnah. Tanakhama says you always Mekadosh it. The Rebbe Lezer says only on Bismanai. Then the Gemara brings 2 additional opinions. Tanya learned the Brisa play my he says the exact opposite of Elazar Tzaddik. He says no, Bismanai on day 30 ain't Mekadosh it. Then you don't have to sanctify it, because as the way Rashi says it doesn't need chizuk, because this is the primary day. So we're going to Mekadosh. We don't have to be Mekadosh it. It's not the regular. You're extending a month. It's the previous one is a day 30, and now you're going to have it on day 31. Then Mekadosh. So then you have to go be Mechazik to be Mekadosh. It's the exact opposite. But he says the 4th opinion says Benkach and Menkach in Mekadosh. The opposite of Tanakhama. Tanakhama says both you have to be Mekadosh, and this Rabbi Shimon says no, never are you Mekadosh. You're never Mekadosh. Not day 30, not day 31. Why? He has a pasuk. Shnei says in Vayikra. Says Mekadosh Nashtas Chamishim you should sanctify the 50th year of Yovel. What you learn from that is Shalom Mekadosh. Only years you sanctify. You have Mekadosh Chadashim. You don't sanctify months. It doesn't hold this whole halacha of being Mekadosh the Chodesh. and it's just automatic. Amr Yudi Mishmul, he says, halacha geblaz l'tzadik, which he says that the halacha is that you only mekadesh it bismanai, but if you didn't see it bismanai in day 31, you're not going to mekadesh it because, like we said, shekra kudsha mishamayim, they already sanctified from heaven. And the Rabbi says, he says, we also learned this in the Mishnah later on. Mishnah tells us, let's say the whole court, all the Jewish people, they saw the new moon. Or let's say, Nechra Eden, they already had checked out the witnesses and they verified that they're saying the truth. But for his people, Mekudish. Didn't get a chance to say, Mekudish. Oh, Schein Shkia. No, it's spät, too late. It's already dark. He didn't get a chance to say Mekudish. So the Mishnah says, Leilan Harizim Oba. That's it, you lost the chance. Even though everyone saw it, doesn't make a difference. You didn't do the actual Kiddush. It's going to be an extended month. Oh, but one thing the Gemara wants to make a diak is, Ma'uber in. Meaning, it sounds like that it's, when it gets dark, it's automatically extended. And Mekudish light, it doesn't say that you Mekadesh it tomorrow. It sounds like it's automatically Ma'uber. So you see, like, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, that when it's Shalom Bisman, when it's day 31, you're not Mekadesh, it just happens automatically. Says Gemara, no, it's not true. In other words, really tomorrow, day 31, you have to be Mekadesh it. Why didn't we say that you Mekadesh it? Because the primary Chiddush we wanted to say in that Mishnah is that it's Ma'uber. Because something that you would have thought to say, and the court, they all saw it. If Farsama, it's all revealed, but you shouldn't extend it because everyone saw it already yesterday. Kamash Malan, that's what we're coming to tell you that it's Ma'uber. But not that you don't have Mekadesh it, you have Mekadesh it, wasn't the part of the Chiddush. And as Rashi explains, and had we said Harizim Miskadesh Lamacher, which is you could have also said it that way, we would have known you have Ma'abrid, if you say you have Mekadesh tomorrow, and I would have thought to say, no, I would have thought to say it's actually, but for the Tikkun Moyadis, we would actually count them yesterday. We'll just do the Kiddush tomorrow. If we have to say, no, it's Ma'uber to tell you that that's the primary halacha, that's not going to be from today, it's going to be from tomorrow, because even though we saw it, so we missed the boat about saying Mekudesh. Continue halacha, the next Mishnah, continuing this theme regarding the Kiddush HaChodesh and regarding the checking out of the witnesses. So the Mishnah tells us the Mus Tzuros Levana, there was forms of images of the moon. Moon had B'tavla on the board, Ubakaisel, Baliyasai on the wall of his attic. Shebehen Manas he would show the simple people. And he would tell them, visual images. Not everyone is a audio learner, kinesthetic, visual, and they need to. They don't do well on written tests. So he has to show them the images, and he says, "What did you see?" He's checking them out. He said, "You saw the new moon. Was it before?" They said, "What do you mean before?" After he says, "Look at this. You see this? Was it like this? Was it like this?" And he was showing them all these different images so that to help them verify what exactly was their testimony. Now the problem is the Gemara has Mishari, is it permitted to go ahead and make images of the moon, of the sun? But says the pasuk in Shemais, the pasuk says, "Loisasun iti," you should not make with me, and it says over there, "Leichesa, v'leizav, loisaskum," you should not make these images. Now, what's iti? Iti is tzuros that are with me, the images that are with me. So what does that mean? So that means loisasun kidmush hamashai. Don't make like the images of those who serve me, which are up there in the heavens, the sun and the moon. So how could Rabbi Gamliel make images of the moon? There's an issue in the Torah of making the image of the moon. On the Bible says no. Torah is only saying you're not going to make things that you could make like them, which you know what it looks like and you could actually make it to the model. The time like learn the Brisa. A person should not make a house. He's going to make it literally a replica. But if it's going to be the heichel, that you can't make exactly the form of the sanctuary. Achsadra, which says generally an achsadra is only if it has 3 walls, but the 4th wall is open. So that's going to be tabnas ulam. You can't make it the same as the antechamber, which although the ulam actually was open had a 4th wall, but it was a very wide opening, so it's similar to what an achsadra would be. You can't make it the same as the ulam was in the Beis Hamikdash, the antechamber. A chatzir, you can't make a courtyard keneged azar that would be the same dimensions as the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Shulchan, you make a shulchan. You can't make the same table they had in the Beis Hamikdash for your table. Menorah keneged menorah. You can't make a candelabra that would be exactly like the candelabra that was in the Beis Hamikdash. Avol, what you could make is, as the Gemara continues from the base, you could actually make shulchan misha v'shal shisha v'shal shmeina. You can make your candelabra exactly like the Beis Hamikdash had, with the same geviyim and the same kaftoidim and the same all them, but you can make 5 or 6 or 8 lambs. But you can't make them up 7 lambs. Even of other types of metals, because Rashi tells us other types of metals would also be valid in the Beis Hamikdash. Like the Brayso teaches Menachas Chapchesim and Beis. It says that menorahs is a klal, which doesn't say what to make it out of. Zavtar is a specific out of gold. And it says Mikshutiyasa, which is again a klal, doesn't say what to make it out of. So just like the specific is a metal, so to all types of metal. So any types of metal, you wouldn't be able to make 7 stems for your candelabra. Basically, he says, no, actually, Afshal Eitz Liyasa. Not only of metal, but you can't make 7 stem candelabra exactly to the form of the one in the Beis Hamikdash, even out of wood. Because he holds actually, even the wooden menorah is kosher in the Beis Hamikdash. Because basically, he expounds the pasuk not as klal prata klal, but actually what we call a ribui miute beribui. Because when you do ribui, what are you including? Including everything. When you're doing the miut, you're excluding cheres, as the Gemara explains as manacha. So what you can't make the menorah out of earthenware, but you could actually make it out of wood. And he actually says, Kedech Shas Malcha B'Schach Benoi. The month that we're getting into, Kislev, they actually, in the Chashmonaim dynasty, when they overpowered the Yavanim, the Greeks, and they chased them out of Yerushalayim, they purified the Beis Hamikdash, and they were very poor. They couldn't make it out of gold. They actually made it out of wood. So you see that you can make them out of wood, but you, a person, cannot make your candelabra with all the exact images of menorah if it's made out of wood. So Amalai, they said to him, to Rabbi Yehuda, what are you talking about? I bring a proof from the Chashmonaim. Shvudin shel barzel hayu. These were iron spits, which Tais says why we're calling it a spit is because it didn't have the gevim kafter and prachim, because that's only if it's made out of gold, as the Gemara says menachas then. But it was just like sticks of iron, but again it wasn't wood. So why did it look like wood? Because v'chipum babatz. There's actually 2 different gears over here. Either because they played it with tin, which tin looks a little woody, or actually some Yisraelis have without the extra bays, be'etz. They played it with wood, but it was really made out of metal. Heshiru, they became, when they got wealthier, asum shal kesem made out of silver. Chazar should be even more wealthy, asum shal made out of gold, but it's not true, they never made out of wood, and that's the machlekes hakapanim. But one thing is that the Gemara was answering was that the only prohibition of making what's with Hashem is only things that you could make. You could make a chatzar, a bayis, a chsadra, a shulchan, a naira, but the moon, you can't make it to the image of the dimensions of what the moon, you can't make it anyway, so that was never prohibited, so there's no problem with having images of the moon. Says he, is that really so? Is it really so that regarding those things that serve God, that you can't make it to the model like the moon, Mishori, is it permitted to make an image of the moon? But the time when the Brayso says, don't make it with me, what does the Brayso say? Don't make like the image of those things that serve in front of me in the heights, which is obviously things that we can't make to a model. We can't. Our planet is the size of these other things that are in front of Hashem, these other planets. So and you see now that they make those images. So Abaye says no. And Tais actually shows that all of these teachings of Abaye, they're all true. There's all truth to these teachings. But he says no, the Torah only made it forbidden to make what's called the 4 faces as one, which was the Chayes HaKodesh. When it says E.T., what does it mean with me? It means literally with Hashem, so to speak, that the Kisar Kavod is riding on those 4 images, as like a chair has 4 legs. That's what you're not allowed to make. But it didn't include the moon. The Gemara says, if that's the case, parts of L'chodei, then if you have only the image of a person's face, Tishri, so that should be permitted to go ahead and make, because one of the 4 images of those chayes is the image of a person's face. And still you're telling me that the only time it's going to be forbidden is when you make all 4 images, that's E.T. So then, Alamatani, why do we learn the Brayso? You're allowed to make all faces, you're not allowed to make the image of a person's face. So why? I thought it's only when you do arba panim, which one of those 4 is the person's face. Why can't you make the person's face if there's only one out of the 4? He says, no, I heard from the teaching from the shiur of Abaya that leisasun E.T., you could read it as leisasun oisi, don't make me. And the human being was created in divine image, and therefore that's a different teaching. That's not just that of the arba panim. That's because a man is God's divine image. And then Taisa says, wait a second. So then what do you need the teaching of the most Arba Panim? Should be also because one of the four is man's face. Why do you need to make Arba Panim? So in this case, actually, when you have other partsufim with that of Adam, is actually eat better, because not only of the Adam, or he says, if you found an image of a person, you wouldn't be able to complete it to the four Panim. So you wouldn't be over that of the Adam, but you wouldn't be able to make it to the Panim. But he continues asking, is that really so? Is it really permitted to go ahead and make the other, let's say, the suns and the moons that serve in front of God in the heights, is that permitted to make? Besides that of the Daled Panim? But time we'll learn the Brisa, Leisasun, E.T. The rest says, you're not allowed to make what Hashem says, what's with me. Which means, Leisasun, you can Musha, Moshe, HaMesham, Shalvan, Bamag. Now I'll make like the images of those things that serve in front of me in the heights. Kagoyin, says the Brisa. Eifanim, Visrafim, V'chayas HaKodesh, Shumalachi HaShodesh. These are all types of malachim. So you see, it's not only the Daled Panim that's on the Kisei covered, that's you're not allowed to make, that's considered E.T. You see, it's all these malachim. So Mabai says, yeah, the Torah only made it forbidden those things that serve God in the highest heights. Where with the 7 Rikiyim, in the Rikiyah Hashavi, in the 7th height, that's what's forbidden because that's called E.T. But the sun and the moon and the stars and the Mazalas, which are in the lower dimensions, in the 2nd Rikiyah, as the Gemara says in Chagigah of your basement bed, that's going to be permitted. The Malachim and the Shafim and the Chayes, right? Those are up there in the 7th Rikiyah. That's forbidden. Narava, it's called. But beyond, but lower than that is permitted. So the Gemara, is that really so? Is it really permitted to make the sun and the moon because they're in the lower the regions of the heights? But by the time when the Brisa, the Pasuk says in the Shema, it says you shouldn't make for you a pesel, a graven image, and any image, Asher B'Shamayim. Shouldn't make an image of anything that's in the heavens. What is that? Says the Brisa l'Rabbis Chama Levana Kecham Mazal. The Brisa says explicitly that the sun, the moon, the stars, the Mazals, constellations, you're not allowed to make those. And when it says Mima'al, the next word in the pasuk from what's above, that's the Rabbis Malach Hashar, includes you're not allowed to make Malach Hashar either. So you see clearly that it's forbidden to make the image of a moon. So that pasuk is telling us that you're not allowed to be la'avdam. You're not allowed to serve them, but to make it, you could make the moon. Says the Gemara, how could you say that? Ila Avdam, if it's to say that you're not allowed to serve them, even a small little worm you're not allowed to serve. Why would I need to include the constellations? Says the Gemara that you're right. A worm is also included. To tell you in the Brisa, when it says further in the pasuk Ashid Ba'aretz, that's in the ground, because Rabbis Harm that's coming to include mountains, and hills, and yam, and seas, and all this, and streams, and rivers, afikim, and streams, and and valleys. When it says mitachas, what's beneath, there's a Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, it's including the small worms. You're right, they're all included, including from the top of the world to the bottom of the world. Says Gemara, but Vasigre Dasa Misha, is that really so that you're saying that just making the moon is permitted and it's only forbidden to worship it? But for time when the Brisa says Leisasun iti, don't make what's with me. Says the Brisa, what does that mean? Leisasun kidmus shamash mesham shalapani. Don't make, not to worship. Don't make like the images of those things that serve in front of me. Could go into chamo ulavana kechamazal. So we have a clear Brisa that debunks everything we're trying to say up until now. You're not allowed to make an image of the sun, the moon, the stars, and the mazalis. So how could it be that the Gamliel had these images if you're not allowed to make an image of the moon? Says the Gemara, you're right. So, but Shani Gamliel is different. Because Achayim Asulai, he had Gentiles make it for him. Now, Tosfos points out, although we know Amir and Achri, although we always talk about the halachas of Shabbos, it's throughout all Isurim, you not tell a non-Jew to do an Isur. How could Gamliel have hired out Gentiles to make him the moon? Says Tosfos, Hachal Legazim Shem Mitzvah. Says because it's a mitzvah that he needed for Kiddush HaChedesh, therefore the Isur Dirabanan of Amir and Achri, they weren't geyser, and that's how he was able to have the images of the moon. The problem is, the Gemara says it still would be a problem. Because even if, let's say, there wouldn't be an Issa of Gamliel to have made that image of the moon, but there's another problem. Because Rabbi Yehuda, we have Rabbi Yehuda who had an image on his ring, the Achayim Asulai, which others, Gentiles, had made for him this image on his ring. Vamle Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda, and Shmuel said to Rabbi Yehuda, who had this ring, he said, Shidna, a sharp one, Sami Eina Dedain, blind the eye of this one. In other words, destroy the image of that ring. So why? Because of suspicion of, but you see that you can't have the, even if you didn't make it, you can't hold on to the image. So how can we have had these images? Says the Gemara, no, I'll tell you why. Hasam over there, it's different. Because Chaysamai, there his seal of Rabbi Yehuda was boiler havim, was sticking out. Umishum chashad, and that's the problem about suspicion that they shouldn't say that it's his idol, it's his avodah zarah. We learn the brisa. Regarding a tabas, a ring that has a image on the seal, it depends what type of image it is. If someone boil it, if the image is sticking out, protruding, so asla nechin, I'll put on your finger, and because they might suspect that it's your avodah zarah. But you actually could seal something with it, because actually when you have a protruding seal, that would actually submerge the image inside, so it's not a protruding image. So that you're allowed to do. But chasam shekei, let's say your seal is actually submerged, that when so then mutzal you're allowed to put it on because no one sees it because it's submerged. But also that you wouldn't be able to seal with it because actually then whatever you're sealing, then actually that would be sticking out, depending on if the stamp is inverted or exverted. But then the Gemara says, "Umi chashin lechashado." Are we really concerned, like we just said, for suspicion? That's what he told them to blind the eye of the image that you have. They were concerned that people are going to think it's Yahweh Zarah. But Vahibe conditioned the Shafa Yosef Nardah. There was the shul in Shafa Yosef, which was Nardah, which either that's the name of the place, but some say Shaf means to remove, and then Yosef is to position it. Where what happened was that this was a shul that was destroyed and was ultimately rebuilt, and the Shekhinah was always over there, and Yechanya and those who were in the Golas with him, they built it because they carried with them the stones from Yerushalayim. They desire your stones. So Shav means they removed it, Yosef, and then they settled it in Narada and Babel. Now this shul, the Havabe Andarta, this shul had a graven image of the king. So there was a statue, which today they probably would have carried away that statue, but they had a statue of the king in the shul. All the great ones, Rav, Shmuel, the father Shmuel, Levi, they all davened over there. They weren't concerned for suspicion. I mean, an image, well, aren't we concerned that they're worshiping an avodah zarah? So the Gemara says that no, it's not a problem because Rav Mishani. When you have a public, we're not concerned that the public, the Gansi, Klal Yisrael, the whole shul, there's a statue outside this shul. We wouldn't think that the whole shiny Eden are doing avodah zarah. One guy on this ring, they were concerned for. But it says, okay, but we're back to the question. When Mul Yachid, Mul himself was an individual. So how could he have had these moons? We should be choshev that he's worshiping the moon. Just like we said, you can have that ring. So says the Gemara 3 answers. Says the Gemara, Kivan the Nasihu, since he was the leader of the Jewish people, Shchichu Rabin Yaveh. So many people always there by his house, by the Nasi. And therefore we're not choshev that he's doing avodah zarah. Just like we said by Ram and not choshev. Or you might say, a second answer, you could say actually the Pragma. He never had an image of the moon. They were actually made of interlocking pieces. And they were only constructed when they needed to go ahead and ask the Eidim questions. So it wasn't a full image of the moon. Or if you raise the point, you give a third answer, L'Islam and Abed. The Ramil made these models for the sake of learning and teaching. It says the pasuk in Devarim, it says, Leisilmad lasas, you shouldn't learn to do, like it says, like the abomination of those Gentiles, the avodah zarah that they do. So for that you can't make the all the different sorcery or avodah zarah, but you could learn to understand and to teach and to do rulings, and therefore, since his purpose was for rulings of Kiddush HaChadosh, that was not included in the Isser of having those images of the moon. Thank you for any time for hosting.